because you were fine until they got you. I know. So,
All right, so it's 7:15. We're all here. The technology is working. I'm gonna call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is to welcome our newest member, Ellen Maria, at-large member. Welcome to the CPC.
Okay.
So glad that you could join us. So we are up to 6 people on CPC, which is fantastic. Next
our
up,
quorum at then?
pardon?
What does that put our quorum at then?
that's what, that's what, yeah.
Yeah, so it's still 5 to make a quorum, so we have one extra beyond quorum.
That's all okay. Here, I'll grab one. Hold on.
So next up is closing out projects. I had some correspondence actually from Mark Perkle a week or so ago talking about some other stuff, and he mentioned that he was under the impression there were a lot of projects that were outstanding that need to be closed out. So we've gone through it, and there aren't a ton, but there are a few. And so in order, this is something we go through periodically, and try to identify which projects have gone, all of the work has been completed, or they've gotten as far as they're going to get, and there's money that we can take back into the Community Preservation Trust. To do that, Freddie's been working with Carla to get a form together that can be filled out for a project between CPC and the funds recipient, so that we can give Carla all the information she needs to move outstanding funds back into the appropriate town account, the appropriate CPA bucket, and so forth.
Can I elaborate a bit?
Please.
So the committee had voted on a form. And then we got another form from Carla, and we never reconciled the two. And we are now at a place where we're going to start doing more moving funds back. So we need to, that hadn't been completed. So this was on the agenda. Recreation is looking to close out some projects. I went through all of the accounts. Kristen's here from Recreation. We actually have 4 open projects. We want to double check that the signs are up on, they are on some, but not on others. We have to go back to the original warrant articles to make sure we put the money back into the right account. And what we had, the CPC didn't have a sign off for the project applicant, and that's what Carla's looking for. And that could be an issue on something where we have a Boy Scout, and he's probably, not a Boy Scout anymore. Maybe not even living in town. So I think it was a recreation project. So we're going to come back to the next meeting and have everything ready. But can I get a consensus from the committee if I take the previously approved CPA document? And I don't think either of these are the Carla one. I could be mistaken. From Carla is our town accountant. Does it say CPA consultant?
Yeah.
That might be the one from Carla. And then, really, I think should have the chair. And, or, me, so that, it works either way.
It's frustrating. Well, she's asking for a copy of the vote taken, but if we could simply affirm by, signature of the chair that a vote was taken.
They want,
minutes.
this is, okay, this is for the auditors, so we will submit what she wants. It's been in the account, it's going to take a little bit extra time, but it's not that big of a deal.
Okay.
We will do that because it's for the auditors. But we will also, I will talk with her about what our form has. If you notice it, it says the project is completed per the MOU, or if not, if there's any outstanding things, that gives the CPC the opportunity to, weigh in on, if not, why not, or whatever the issue is, right?
Right.
So if I can get consensus that I can work with Carla to merge the 2 documents into one, that we would then next time fill out with all the information, the date of the vote, the date of the, not the date of the vote, the date of the town meeting, the account numbers, the dollar amount, all of that. So you want the original dollar amount, how much we'll be charging. And we need to know what account it came out of. to put it back into the right account. So if I have your consensus to do that, we will have this ready for your next meeting. For the recreation projects. that we're doing. And then from there on, the next thing on the agenda says, next steps, we're going to be going through all of the outstanding accounts to say, are they in process? Are they done? Can we start moving? That sound good? Thank you.
Everyone on board with that?
Yep.
All right, fantastic. Next up, preliminary draft budget, and there's some really good news here. And Freddie has put a lot of work in with Carla and Brian. The new accounting system provides a ton of very detailed information, which I suppose is great, but makes it very confusing for a layperson to understand. And Freddie has been working with them to figure out exactly where we stand financially. And I don't want to steal her thunder, but it's great news, and she worked hard to figure it out.
Well, thank you, Ben. And first I'll say this is the same spreadsheet we've been using almost, it's evolved a little bit, but almost from the beginning. This is a spreadsheet where I plug the numbers in and manipulate them. And, you know, I get the numbers and then I'm going to walk through it, because one of the things that was almost shocking to me today was I was going through old emails and I happened to look at one from July of last year. The only person on the committee today that was on the committee then is Ben.
Yeah.
That is a shocking turnover that we have not had since we started. So, you know, I don't think this is going to be too repetitive to most of you. And I will also say, I know when I go through these numbers and how we get to it, people's eyes start to glaze over and roll. Let it roll, baby. I'll try to make it simple, but it's worth having at least an understanding of how we come up with the budget. All right, so I'm going to start, the first page is the critical one, right? And this is a working, and I think I called the file a rough preliminary draft budget estimate. Just so you know, there's nothing here that the end result is not firm, because there's still all these balls up in the air, and I'll talk about them when we get. So on the left-hand side of the front page, the fiscal year 25 surcharge receipts estimate, right? So how we come up with that is we take what we took in last year, and I'm going to say that's an unknown. Brian will have better numbers in a few more weeks, he hopes. We're going with this number for now. Then we come up with what we think the tax rate is going to increase by conservatively, but not lowballing next year. Earlier I had 4% because I thought that was good, but then they said put it back to 3.5. So it's a 3.5% increase over last year's surcharge. That's based on when our taxes go up, the surcharge goes up. There's a, you know, it's not exactly 1-to-1 because there are some exemptions, but it's pretty close. So that's the estimate. So we come up with, and this on the spreadsheet that you were emailed would have color coded, and this one here isn't quite off, just a little bit cut off. So the 447,052, that's how much we expect the surcharge to be next year. That goes over to the estimated budget in the box, right? And I make it clear that it's draft and that these numbers come from town treasurer, so I'm not just pulling them out of my hat. So the 447 is what we think.
Can I ask you a question on the 447? What makes up the 447? The 431, and then it has 1,035 is there?
No, that's a
number missing?
multiplier,
Okay.
1.035,
got
So
it.
that's
Okay, I misunderstood.
3.5%.
Got it.
All right,
Thank you.
okay. Next on the left-hand side is the state match reconciliation. Now, and we're going to estimate it below, but I'm just going to explain why this box is here. We estimate what we think we're going to get in the surcharge every year. Sorry, I said surcharge, I meant state match. And if we're off by more than a diminutive amount, we have to make an adjustment. So if it's, you know, if it's $10,000, that might be okay, but if it's 40,000, or we always decide when we have to take the adjustment, because we want to reflect, particularly for the 10% set aside, that every account gets their share. So that happens. This year, Carla was concerned. I spoke with her yesterday, I think, that because The state match is based on a fund. And the fund has money that goes in, and it's derived from every time you, somebody buys a house and you register, what is it, a deed? The recorded deed, I think it's $25, might have gone up, goes into the fund. On the other hand, every community that signs up for CPA is withdrawing from the fund. So when you have a tough real estate, not a lot of deals going on, the income goes down. And then what happened last year, the city of Worcester and other towns signed on, which means the money coming out increases. What also happens is when you get more towns, you have more people advocating to keep the state match high. So after they're there, you'll see maybe the legislature do some free cash, which they didn't do this year. Usually they bumped it up. The Community Preservation Coalition, who we pay funds for, they're not just advisors, but they're advocates for the Community Preservation Act. They are, I'm not sure if they're registered lobbyists, but they work on Beacon Hill to make sure that the state match stays pretty good, because then why would people do it? Although on the other hand, who here wouldn't run out to the bank if they were offering 20%? And when we had 100%, we were one of the earliest adopters. There was a lot of money and not many towns pulling. So we got 100%, but we were never guaranteed 100%. We were always guaranteed our fair share of what's in the trust fund. So our fair share went down to 20%. This year was estimated by DOR in October. They haven't sent the funds out yet, so we don't know for sure. Carla was very concerned if we overestimated, it would have put other accounts out of whack, and I'll go over that later. I was very pleased when I looked at the estimate from last year is that it was 20%, and I'm going to say, somebody's pretty good. No, it's 20% last year, the estimate, not
Oh,
for this year.
Yeah.
So hopefully we're going to not come out to that on the books, but we get what we get. I mean, that's just what it is. So this here box that's got all the question marks, until we get the state match, we're not going to know. Go down to the fiscal year 24 state match. So
I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So your feeling is that we're going to get close to the 82,000.
yes. Based on the Community Preservation Coalition, and if you're not signed up, we sent all your names. You should be getting a newsletter from them, and Ellen will make sure you're there. They sent one out in October with the bad news that it was estimated at 20%. The year before, I think it was 35.
32 or 35, something else.
Right.
It's pretty good.
So this year, we don't know what it's going to be, but they estimated at 20% in October.
Just a quick question, is that at all related to the percent surcharge that cities and towns have? Like if you adopt the
Yeah.
higher,
The first round, the
Okay.
base, okay, so we're at 1%, we get a base, everyone gets the same amount. Then there's other ways you can get more of a match. If you're at 3%, you go into a second round,
Okay.
and some of the most disadvantaged communities get a higher bump. So we don't qualify for that bump. So anyhow, if you come here and fiscal year 24 state match. I might want to change that, but it's for fiscal year 25 next year, so I want to change that. But you have to understand how this comes about, right? Last year, the state match is a year behind, and it gets really confused, but they're matching this November what we took in last fiscal year. Books closed in June. Now they take a few months to see what came in, and then they're going to match, right? So they're matching against fiscal year, let me get this right, we're in fiscal year 24 now, right?
Yep.
They're matching against what we took in actual receipts in fiscal year 23. So for next year's projection, we have to come up with our best guess what's going to be come in for fiscal year 24, which we're still in. We're making an estimate how much that is, and then we're matching. And we're guessing what the match is gonna be based on, I do research, I talk with the coalition, we use our best, sensibility. We always like to come in a little bit, we'd rather make an adjustment over than, and we, but we're not trying to have a lot. We're not trying to budget under, and then next year we would fix, right? So this is all an unknown, because there was such a freaking, I should not freaking freak out about the 20%. I wanted to be sure we were conservative for a placeholder. I put 15% there. That made our town accountant very happy. But if I get better information, we will go with the best. I shouldn't say we will go. I will present to you a recommendation for the best, and it could be higher or lower. So that money comes over on the right-hand side, estimated budget. It's the 64,790, right? So then I had the adjustment just in case we got more than the 20%, which is not likely, but, and then we have the total amount, right? So then what we do is we take that of the total receipts, that's the estimated surcharge, right? Because it's a budget. And then we have to put 10% of it into each of the 3 buckets for the categories. Housing, historical, open space. We also can take 5% for admin, which is how you pay for the Community Preservation Coalition's dues. We pay for the ads for our annual presentation, and it's how you support having Betsy and myself help you out. So then that comes up with a total amount of the set-asides, right? Then we subtract what we think the whole receipts are going to be. I mean, we subtract that from the total receipts, right? So we come up with a 332,697. And I need to change that. I'm sorry, because I was using last year's, and again, rough draft. This for year 25 budgeted reserves, right? So here's, why do we do that? We see with, this might be too much info, but just know, if we want to use that money for a special town meeting, say after the tax rate is set, we can't touch it if we haven't authorized it. So this is putting it into an account saying, we can use this if we need to before you certify and close out the accounts next end of fiscal year. So it's a sort of like holds it there in that account. All right. So you're going to turn the page. Is everyone okay with all of that? Yep. Are there any people watching?
Yep.
Marcy Jones,
Yeah. Okay. I'm Marcy.
I share it to Excel.
Oh, thank you. That's up there. Okay, so if you can go to the next page. Oh, and on, go back, I'm sorry, go back and this will show, see where it's highlighted,
Yellow?
the yellow we haven't done yet, so that's why that's highlighted. You see where the estimated state match is beige, and then it goes over onto the budget, so you can see where the numbers come from, and then it follows over to the estimated budget. But then on this one here, the budgeted reserves is in green. Turn the page and you'll see where it shows up. Okay, so we're not going there yet, but just so you know that I try to color code it to make it a little easier. But if you don't know what the codes mean, you're not going to understand. So we're going to start at the top. This here is the buckets. Now, unlike regular municipal budgeting, at the end of the year, everything gets zeroed out. CPA accounts stay with the funds in. So we have 3 buckets we put the funding into. We have historic, open space, and housing. The historic budget, this printout is a little bit out of whack, but if you can see that one, it looks pretty good. The historic, we have a lot of historical projects, so that gets zeroed out every year. The open space, we haven't had open space projects, so that's been building up, and the same with the housing bucket. And historic had 51,184.18 added from the 10% on the first page. And I hope, because I changed it, that the same number it is. So we have a lot of historic projects, so we're going to spend that and zero it out again. The open space, we're not right at this point in time spending anything, so it's going to be added. And the same with housing. Then if you go down.
No, I'm listening.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was.
No.
on here.
No. Just trying to,
So if you
My
go
bad.
down, and this is a little confusing because the lines are better on this screen than on this printout. So underneath, we have account balances, okay? And I'm gonna double check if these fiscal years are correct, because I copied from last year's page, so don't be worried about that. The fiscal year 23 CPA fund balance, that has $751,109.66 in it. That can be used for any of the allowed uses of CPA. Then we have the budgeted reserve from last year. Now, from last year, that was where we put the money that I just talked about in the first page from last year's account. So that has the 343,278. I'm sorry, 728. But if we take in less than we budgeted of the state match, it has to come out of that account. So that's a placeholder that made the town accountants worries that we're not going to spend more than is in the account. And I can go into that another time, but just know that that's, right now, we're planning on having that full amount, but it might be less if the state match comes in and as less. Because you have to take it out of somewhere because it's in the budget from last year, right? Then, from the front page, for this year, the budgeted reserve of 334 goes in, right? 334,195. So that gives us a grand total, and this is an estimate because the 334 is not final yet. It's always an estimate, but I get better numbers. It's hard for CPA because our town meeting comes before we have really confirmed numbers that we're confident. There's always a little bit of a guess, but we've been really good for 20 years, so.
The green, the 343,728 is supposed to match the one on the front page. No,
Yeah, does it not?
no, it's just off by 1,000, you said?
That's because, and I'm sorry,
Is that the adjustment? or something?
that's because I changed it from the multiplier
Oh,
from
okay.
4% to the,
Oh, we're talking about this figure here, right? This is the one that's supposed to match, or the? Sorry, I'm looking at the.
The green one's.
green.
Green one's.
The 334.
Okay.
It's 332.
Yeah, it's 332.
yeah, so I will fix that. And when I say this was, that's why I said this is a real working document. Some of these numbers were coming in yesterday and today while we were talking, so, I mean, while I was working.
No, that's fine. I was just like, thanks.
But thank you for that. So now we're going to go to down below. You see the box at the bottom where it says bond warrant articles. So we have 3 outstanding bonds. We purchased a preservation restriction on the Burnett House. We did the restoration of the library and we did the restoration of the townhouse. The Burnett House has been, it's been out there for a while, so the bond's getting lower, but it's at 75,438. I took out from up above the historic bucket, the 10%. So we can use that on any of the historic projects. The committee has had different opinions in the past, but the reason it's easiest just to take it out against one. It doesn't make one project more historic or less historic because the warrant article says it's a historic project. It's just we're putting the money against one project. So first one, It's the Burnett House, so we take it against that, which means there's a remainder of the 24. 253. Somehow these, on the printout, these numbers have different decimal points, so I'll fix that the next time.
Freddie, do you know how many more years are left in the Burnett House? I should know what I know.
I don't know off the top of my head, there's a lot.
Thank you.
I will actually, I have run in past years our bonding capacity.
Yep.
It's a little bit of a digression. I can do that again. What happened is also is that the townhouse didn't get bonded right away, and we'll see that in a minute.
Okay.
So. The library at 61,000. And then we have the townhouse. Now, the townhouse has two items because the town treasurer will wait to group projects together, not just CPA projects, but so we can get the best bond rating, best interest. It's not interest, is it? But whatever, the best deal he can. So sometimes it takes a while after we vote it for the real bond to go out. And in the meantime, once the project starts, he does a short-term loan. And we have to make payments on those. That's why you have two numbers here. So there's the short-term bond, which is the 52,841, and then there's the full bond. It is 141,850. So one is for fiscal year 23 that we are still in when we make the bond payment, and the next one is for next year's the new bond. Does that make sense?
Does it, now, did he finally get it, has it finally been bonded?
You know, I didn't ask that, but he gave me the number, so I'm
Okay.
assuming it is.
I hope so. So, okay,
Yeah, because otherwise, some of the short-term bonds, you're not like paying off the principal, you're just paying interest,
Right,
so.
right.
We don't like it, but in the long term, it's better for the lower interest rate. So you're gonna see this total. The three totals up above, Burnett House, the library, and the townhouse. And this here totals the 279, 945. That's what the three bonds minus the 51,000 from the historical match that we already subtracted up above, right? And that comes out against the total amount of the three accounts we have money to spend out of. And actually, when we get further down, we have all your projects, you will decide which account to pull which funds out of, and there's some reasoning of why you do that. And then what that leaves us with is the 148,993 of funding available for the projects this year.
and I want to make sure I have this right, pretty sure I do. That's inclusive of all three buckets.
No.
That's in addition to the 576 in housing, the 263 in open
Housing
space.
can only be spent on housing.
Yep.
Mhm. Open space on open space.
Understood.
So that money's in those buckets. It's not moving over anywhere.
Is it part of the total?
Yeah,
Well, do you see where the total came from? These other three
I do. Okay.
distinct, not including those.
No, the reason I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it is because it's such a large number. I just didn't
Yeah.
expect we were gonna have this much.
I'm not
available.
surprised.
And I'm thrilled. It's wonderful. I'm so shocked. I can't quite.
I'm not as
accept
shocked
it.
as you are, right?
So just to, so 1,148,000, which is 1,428 minus the 279 in bonding.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
So the bonding is, we're obligated to pay. Now, I want to first, oh, Brett, you have a question?
Yeah, so does that mean we have 1.1 to spend on anything, but we could also spend 576 on housing and 263 on open space?
If you have those projects
Yeah, okay.
that meet the requirements, and when you say everything, because this is recorded, everything that you have an application with allowable
yes.
uses under this Community Preservation Act.
Yep.
Right. So any of the four categories, because there's four categories, there's recreation, open space, housing, and historic.
It's when we totally fair. So you're saying we have all of that. together. So
So the 1.148 is,
it's minus
Minus.
this, yeah.
yeah, minus
Minus
is,
the bond.
Yeah.
yeah, so the 1.428 is not made up of the 263 for open
Right.
space or the 576 for housing, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay,
So when we
And that's
talk,
what we're
and
all,
you're-
it's not that you're doing a bad job explaining it,
Yeah,
it's
I'm
just.
doing a great job explaining
Yeah.
okay.
and I talked about rolling eyes. You guys are wonderful because you're paying attention, right? And you're asking good questions. The thing to think about, we always talk about CPA is buckets.
Yeah.
Right? There is, the 10% buckets, and those keep adding up until you use them. And then there's it's kind of hard to understand this, but there's 3 accounts of the big I don't want to say it wrong for his accounting purposes, but you can, that 3 buckets of funding that you can use for any of the purposes. So you can use it all towards historical, you can use it all towards recreation, all towards housing, open space. Or you can put a little here, a little there, but it depends on what your applications are. But the reason there's 3 is have the budgeted reserve from last year that will wrap over at the end of the fiscal year into the unreserved. So look at it this year. This is a little bit of finance that might be a little bit confusing, but the fiscal year 25 budgeted reserves, that doesn't come into play until July 1st of this year, right? At which time the budgeted reserve from 24 will get wrapped into the CPA fund balance. Because there's only, but we can, because we're budgeting, there's money that are in accounts, funds that are in accounts. And then there's funds that we're anticipating we're budgeting for next year. And we can use all of them at town meeting, but you don't start spending most of them until July 1st.
What is the average length of a bond for,
20 years.
so? I guess I have a couple questions. And again, this is because I'm new and I haven't gone through this process. So say 5 years from now, the town decides we're not gonna do CPC anymore. We're now committed to all of these other bonds. So as we look at the 1.148, should we be taking into account potentially what someday may or may not happen? No.
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
When you enter into the CPA.
Yeah.
It's like having a business. You look at it as perpetual.
Right.
Right? If the town chooses to get out of doing Community Preservation Act surcharge, opt out, they still have the obligation, and that's a decision the town will make. They will still have to, and there's a whole thing in the CPA rules, they have to cover the bonds.
Okay.
So the person on town meeting floor saying, let's get out of it,
Yeah.
we're only getting 20%. And I still laugh at that, but that person will also say, and how are you going to cover the rest of the money and not even get that surcharge? I mean, the state match.
Okay.
So no, we would never consider, I shouldn't say we, you're the committee, you would be unwise to think, oh, we better save money if the town's going out, because you're not obligated. If the town opts out, the town becomes responsible.
Okay.
And also-
Of course, they will take any funds that are left and go.
and
Of
it's
course,
just-
and again, I'm not advocating for anybody to do that, but
Yeah,
again,
no,
just.
It's
our
a
question.
lot to wrap your mind around. I guess it like sort of at the highest level, the argument for bonding is you spread the cost over the period for which the benefits accrue for what you paid
Yep.
for. And if CPA were to be taken away, I mean, the benefit is still accruing to these various projects that we funded,
Right.
so the town's gonna keep.
Okay.
And I will say, I will have I ran this out back when we did the Deerfoot project, the Deerfoot Road, and we were trying to figure out, we had enough funding and bonding money, right?
Yeah.
I did a bonding capacity. So to bond, if we had a big project, we wanted to bond it, we're tapped out right now.
Yeah.
And it's based on, for anyone interest, 75% of our
Oh.
surcharge. You can't bond against the state match because, you don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And if you had two different uses, it would be, you won't have the 10%, so you would be bonding against, maybe 65%. And if you had three different uses, you could only bond against 95. I said 65, I should have gone the other way, 85 and then 95%. So right now, we only have bonds on historical projects.
Yep.
Every year, the bonds go down.
Yeah.
And the surcharge at 3%.
Yeah.
And what I did is I took every year, subtracted, multiplied, came up with an average of, I think it was 3.5%. So I did a run that our taxes average, because taxes go up.
Yeah.
Somebody who didn't want us to do the project had the surcharge level and the bonds level. And, it was like, no, the bonds go down. So I ran them out. The only trouble here is because we waited on the townhouse bond, it's higher now. Like what?
Rates have gone up.
What?
Oh, well, rates have gone up also, so.
Well, but it's like if we started 2 years ago, it would have gone down.
Right.
And so it would be going down with the other. So you have to have some money available to bond against. And in another 5 years, maybe you'll be available to. I mean,
When we bonded the townhouse, you went through a similar exercise with our bonding capacity and. And it looked like, for 7 or 8 years, we're just completely tapped out with bonding capacity from the time when that was approved by town meeting. But we're slowly getting there, and this is a pretty song. This is just to make sure, I have my head wrapped around it correctly. The $1.15 million in budgeted and unreserved accounts. And then on top of that, 576 in housing. We don't have any housing projects proposed right now, but 263 in open space. In this work, we're talking about perhaps putting towards the Burnett House. So it's the bottom line is even higher than the 1.148. It's
total dollar amount.
yeah, it's okay.
Can I ask one more question? Sorry. So as we look ahead to the new projects that may be coming before us, this year specifically, we know based on the townhouse, the bonding for the townhouse, the library in Burnett is 194. Should we be trying to forecast out and try to stay within the 330, 334 window? Just
Of what?
so if you're taking in 334 for fiscal year 25, and I'm thinking ahead, Freddie. If we're taking in 335, let me do it another way. Say we did projects and we did bonding and we used everything that was this 1.15. So when we're looking at projects as we go forward, we're only going to have the 334 plus whatever the match may or may not be going forward to be able to use. So should we, and again, I don't know, does CPC look at that when they start looking at the projects and
That's a really good question. And the answer in the past was no, because we always had more funds available than projects that came before us.
Yeah.
And that was, I've joked before, it was like, I joined the committee at the exact perfect time. My very first meeting was when we voted to approve the very last bond payment on Chestnut Hill Farm. It was my first meeting. And that opened up this honeymoon period where we would basically look at projects and see if they comply with the CPA and then give them a thumbs up.
Yeah.
But now what you're talking about is, unfortunately, we don't get enough information from various entities in town about various plans they have. It'd be nice if we could plan a little bit better for exactly that reason. But I think that has to be part of our thinking.
Can I add in
Yeah.
there? So what this committee should be looking to do this year is creating a plan moving forward. It is thinking about the future needs of the town.
Yeah.
And that's every year. We always have a public outreach and we do a PowerPoint, but we invite everyone. We invite all of the entities, in departments and in the nonprofits. We put it out there to the general public. Back in the day, we used to put flyers everywhere and nobody came to the presentation. And you don't have a good idea, and finding another way to do that outreach might be valid or just your own gut, but say, in 3 years, we're gonna have this project, we should be putting money aside for that. And there's a way to do that, and maybe we could have the coalition come in and get some advice. Or look to some resources on the coalition's website. Because you don't want to be in a position where you think this is an okay project. Let's fund it because it meets the requirements, but there's something really important next year.
Yeah.
Having said that, though, Ben was a little mistaken when he said it was always we could fund everything. Because the first vote we ever took, after we passed the Community Preservation Act, then you collect the funds for a year before you can take a vote to spend it. And the first vote the CPC took was to fund the I forget how much of it we funded, but we figured out our bonding capacity and we tapped it out for 20 years. Then there was a little, why we write your own warrant articles. There was a little Google, or what's a good word for that? They came and they said, look, we bonded it for 11 years to save you all that interest. And that'd be like if you had a house mortgage for 30 years and they said, we're going to save you interest, but the first year you own more than all your income has to go to it. So we worked out it was a big compromise. We agreed to pay 75% of our surcharge receipts based on whatever it went up. If it went up, 75% is what the town got. That
No,
was a big deal, but it was all we had was the state match. But back then it was 100%, so we still were pretty good.
No, it was the honeymoon period started literally my first meeting on CPC when we voted to make the last bond payment on Chestnut Hill Farm, which is like a $4 million bond. From that point onwards, you know, the CPA trust fund was flush, and you know, it made our decisions a lot easier to make. But now it would be really nice if we had enough information to put together a 5-year plan. We try, as Freddie has described, we beg for folks to let us know what's coming down the road, and recreation has been the best of any
I
county
was just
park.
gonna ask you a question.
Yeah, no,
Recreation,
really.
you were gonna- yeah.
Yeah.
So I need to tell you a couple of things before we close out the budgeting. One was because DOR was into accounting and treasury yesterday, I think, and both Brian and Carla told me, well, you don't have to do that, you can do this. And so I said I would bring it up, but always the committee is well aware of your process. We put the 10% in to all of the buckets. And the reality is, you don't have to put it in if you're going to spend it on a project. If you're going to spend more than 10%, and obviously we're spending more than 10% on all those bonds, which are all historic projects. My response is, and I'm telling you, and this is my recommendation, is we put the money in and then we pull it out. It doesn't change the bottom line. They said, well, you'd have more flexibility in the unreserved, but only if we didn't take the money out, because we're not tying it up. So why do we do it? It is an extra accounting adjustment, whatever, they have to put it in and pull it out. But I want you to see on the warrant article every year, the 10%.
Yeah.
Because what if somebody looks at that and says, well, why didn't you fund historical this year?
Yeah, I think it's cleaner.
Yep.
So I just want, I said I would ask you. And I'm seeing all nodding heads, so I'm going to say for the record, for the minutes, there's a unanimous consensus. You don't need to take a vote, but you want to continue with that.
And the warrant article just says, like the warrant article that Bob given, 51,000 and change from the historic preservation account, and then the remainder $24,253 from the general unreserved account, right in the warrant article for that bond payment. It details how it's being taken out, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
It will say from the.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's another, you have to make that ledger entry, but it's just cleaner.
Well, because people need to be able to do it themselves.
Yeah.
They need to be able to see that and put the 10% aside, because I guarantee the year you don't do it, if somebody looks back and they don't see all the projects, they're going to be, concerned that somebody's not getting their full share. Do I need to talk about the open space bucket? Okay. It may come up sometime. you know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so next up, overview of CPA enabling legislation funding requirements. So Freddie and I have spoken a little bit about this since the last meeting, because we're such a new committee. Learning about, you know, you learn very quickly that there are 4 things that can be funded: historic, open space, housing, and recreation. But exactly what qualifies under those headings is, it turns out, a much more complicated matter. And Freddie has put together some materials to help us through that. In particular, one that I really liked was this informational guideline release from the Department of Revenue. Right? This looks like a different one. They have a great one that goes through, and it is okay. It's at the end. I know the one that I was looking for, a very thick document. At the end, it has a bunch of examples that I found really helpful of
So,
yeah, of projects and why certain things are fundable, why certain things aren't.
so may
Yes,
Sorry.
please. Yeah. No,
I don't mean to interrupt. This is that document. I cut everything that was irrelevant for focus tonight, because that document, and I've sent that out to the committee before, and you want to hold on to it. And you don't have to know it all, but just know that it's the best guidance on CPA overall. Department of Revenue is the, CPA surcharge is a tax. It's a surcharge on your taxes, but it's a tax. It's governed by the Department of Revenue. Therefore, they write these informational guidelines. Not often. This one was from 2019. When CPA first started, we were one of the early adopters. And we called it, there was a lot of gray areas. The legislation said certain things. What's happened since in the past 20 years that I've been on is case law comes into play. Somebody will sue, somebody will sue a town for approving something that comes into play. DOR has reviewed and come up with opinions. I think that would be the correct term. And then they write these guidelines explaining how CPA can be run. One of the reasons this committee historically has always said we don't, people come in and say, well, this town did this. It's like, your committee has your own sensibility and decision-making power. And basically this committee has historically said, that's nice, but we look at it through our lens. And one of the reasons for that is we know that in the past, we funded projects that you would not fund today. Gray areas seemed okay. Not every project that you think is a great project and it's historical or recreation or open space, they're not all necessarily allowable under the act. And in the application, we sent out we always put that little chart. It's really a very basic and not as detailed as the committee needs to know and as applicants really need to know. And in this document here, which you got the full one, it's like 58 pages. This here is the cutout of the part you were talking about that's really helpful. There's this additional chart that I emailed to you. That's helpful to know. That's sort of more, if it's this, go to, it's a flow chart, go here, right? Can you do this? Can you not do that? Then we have this document, which is, I left the parts in there on relevant to projects in front of you. And I thought we could maybe go through those. And then the additional 2 pieces. At the last meeting, the committee asked me to contact the coalition to discuss if the trolley, the trolley and the fire truck So there is no application for a fire truck, but there was an email to Ben. So he asked me to get, questions about vehicles in historic preservation. So after the meeting, Ben then asked me about, we got the Historical Society's application for Bayville Village Hall. He asked me about that. There were emails that went back and forth between Ben and Mark Purple about funding the irrigation at the golf course, thank you. And there was also a question about the sawmill. the
Oh,
sawmill.
this Solid.
Solid.
Yeah.
So I made an appointment with Stuart, who is the executive director of the Community Preservation Coalition. As well, and the coalition is made up of all the top groups in the state representing historical housing, recreation. You go to their website, you should become familiar with it. If you have questions, there's technical advice, there's all kinds of information there. And you should be getting the monthly newsletter. So Stuart and I made an appointment. He said, can you send me the application? So I sent him the ones we were discussing was the
Irrigation.
no, that was just a question. The sorry, Falcones, I'm going to call it the Falcones, that comes off my tongue easier. And the Historical Society's application. So I sent him those two and we had a conversation and he came back with some guidance. So with CPA, all of this here is what's an allowed use, not, a decision for the committee of value. There's no value add to this conversation. It's just what can you fund CPA? So first of all, for the fire, let me just go to the agenda. Sorry. For the 21 Boston Road Historic Preservation. Actually, I'm going to start with the golf course irrigation. So the golf course has revolving funds. Ben asked if the town would take a bond out and get reimbursed, right?
I spoke with Brian at our last meeting. I told Tony Schoner that, I offered to reach out to Brian because Tony seemed a little overwhelmed by the various answers he got on the bonding issue. So I talked to Brian via email. And so Brian kind of confirmed one thing that Tony said was that it's difficult to bond against the golf course revolving fund because it doesn't have a very long track record. Number one. Number two, the length of the contract with New England Golf isn't long enough that it would cover the period of the bond. But what he did say was the town could independently bond the project and simply direct the revolving fund towards the bond payments. And that sounded to me like a great possible solution. He looped Mark Purple in on that also, and Mark reached out to me with an email, and his suggestion was that the committee, if we are able to bond half of their request. He didn't specify how the other half would be paid for, but I'm not sure if he's maybe the town would bond it separately or it would be paid out of the revolving fund. I'm not quite sure, but he suggested of their total request for $500,000 roughly that we bond $250,000. And now,
So I read the emails differently. And it was fund $250 because I don't even know that we can bond $250. And that it was left up in the air, like who's going to pay the rest? Are they asking for 500,000?
roughly, it's
Okay.
for something.
So I approach,
Sorry, just a quick question. So they suggested that with the bonding that was out, that it'd be paid through the revolving fund, right?
Yeah.
So what would happen, for example, if the revolving fund came up short in a given year and you don't have as much money as the revolving fund to cover the bond? Would the general fund?
or if something even came up at the golf course that they needed.
Yeah.
The bond, you can't bond against the revolving fund, so that's not
Well,
the
that's-
issue.
Yeah,
There's no,
that's-
I
it'd be
didn't
the
say
town
any,
getting the bond and just deciding we'll use the revolving fund while it's there, but if it goes
Yeah.
away, the town's still responsible.
Is there a way that the revolving fund could make a commitment of, I don't know, throw a number out there? Because again, you don't want to deplete the revolving
Yeah.
fund for this because things may come up.
I have the answer.
Can I ask the question first, then you can answer? Just for anybody that may be listening, is there a way that the town, or the revolving fund can commit a portion of what goes into the fund, amount that shouldn't create an issue? And that's, for me, that's an easier sell for town meeting to have, you know, the golf course revolving fund committing even a small portion. So, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, because I was trying to say this at the beginning, so I asked. I'm really sorry for interrupting.
No.
I asked Stuart, because I had this thought. I didn't think it sounded like the town was, from the emails, the way I read them, that they were gonna fund the project and that we could fund half of it, but that's half of the irrigation system.
Yeah.
Maybe I misread, but, so I asked Stuart, I said, can the CPC, not the CPC, the CPA, does the Community Preservation Act allow someone to pay us back? And the answer is yes. Now, how I proposed this is they have $80,000 in their revolving fund right now, is what I believe we heard.
Yep.
Mhm.
Whatever amount they've determined that they need to cover whatever the expenses they use that for, this would be a negotiation with the committee.
Yep.
Whatever amount of that 80,000 they don't have to have, and I think it's to use on things for the golf course, so it's not for it's not for regular expenses.
Mhm.
So they should be able to know what they have, like they paid for the parking to be paid.
Yep.
So what I said is, okay, so then the committee, if you have the funds, we don't have the bonding ability, spend money from the account. So this is to be, so 500 minus 80.
Of that 80, some will be used on the golf course, so that whole, I wouldn't consider that entire 80,000 available, but some amount per year. The idea that Freddie's getting in on, I think is a very interesting
So
idea.
if, depending on how much you have, when you look at all the projects, just pretend it comes out to 450,000 you put up, and then you have a legally, the town council has to weigh in and make this document happen, that they are required to repay and come up with a percentage of their annual intake and have it not a term, but until they pay it on. And so you will be losing some interest, you will be losing some flexibility of funding other projects. But you'll be funding this project and basically not spending any money. Besides not having it available.
We'd be giving the golf course a 0% loan.
Well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So basically, we're helping, our point of a revolving fund is to become self-sufficient. They need a few years to get on their feet.
Yeah.
We use CPC funds to help them get on their feet. There's a little interest along the way, but is that money definitely coming back to CPC or is it gonna dump back into a general fund?
We
has to
can't do it unless, sorry. My first question is, can the CPA accounts get money in? The answer is yes. Would you do this if it didn't come to the CPA? I would say no. You don't have to. I think the town could say, well, we'll take it, but if this is sort of a funding situation like that's happening, you can make the legal documents say they have to give it to the CPA.
We write the warrant.
Yeah.
But it's not the warrant article. Well, that would be in the warrant
It would
article,
be,
but you
yeah.
need some sort of legal contract through the town council.
So is there a way to CPC to fund part of it and then to pay back over time part of it? Is it an all or nothing? It is, okay.
Because there's no bonding,
Got it.
right? And who's gonna front the money?
Okay.
Unless you can get unless the town wants to fund some of it.
But I'm not sure like why, that seems like a good arrangement.
Well, you have to remember 1.4. Now we're talking about taking,
525,000, right?
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I'm just
So-
thinking if it's a bonded project.
It's
and
not
they make-
bonded.
Okay,
Here's what,
Okay.
the CPA could bond, but you don't have any bonding capacity.
Right.
All right, I got you.
And the town's not interested in bonding. And you can't bond against the revolving fund because it's an unknown. Just like we can't bond against the state match because it's an
Yeah.
unknown.
That kind of goes back to my 334 a year and where we go, because something unexpected could always come up and just take the big chunk out of what you have as a nest egg, if you will. With the 1.15 is, to me, is like a nest egg almost. It's over and above, and if we take half of it to do this, I worry when over the next 5 years or however long it's gonna be paid back. You know, what if something else comes up as well?
Well, we also have a number of other applications.
Correct, that's it.
Which.
So you're going to consider all the applications. This question that I'm giving you this information
right.
is just for you to consider.
Right.
I'm not saying do it, I'm just saying this is what you can do, coming up with other areas, but always how we look at it. The CPA accounts are not a saving account.
Yeah. I know.
If there's a project worth funding. And here's the other thing about the golf course. They took in, somebody said, oh, they only had 30,000 a few years ago. Yeah, when it was under construction. This year was a very rainy year. Two things happened. It rained every weekend. There wasn't a lot of golfing on the weekends. However, because of all the rain, the course stayed green because we don't have irrigation. So people who would have left in June, July stayed on the golfing days. So the actual payback could be better than the 80,000 because you had all those rainy Saturdays. With an irrigation system, you will have a good playing season. Now, I've heard that from somebody at the golf course, but something for you to consider.
And another thing about this is that it gives us the opportunity, I mean, we have to always be looking for ways to sort of stretch our funds to get the most use out of them. This is something I hadn't really thought of before, but this is effectively us being able to offer sort of a 0% interest loan to help a project come to fruition. This is another tool that we should sort of keep in the back of our minds that can be used.
Yes. Because I hadn't realized until I thought of it for this project that you can get money contributed back and you can make it a requirement. So anyhow, that was the first question. The next question was,
Oh, no.
with Stuart, was 21 Boston Road. Okay, so if something we're gonna go over again and again is first thing with projects that are privately owned, not owned by the town. There's an anti-aid amendment to the state constitution. You cannot be providing benefit to private enterprise, and that includes nonprofits and other groups, non-town entities. You can't provide aid unless there's a public benefit. So Stuart asked me what would the public benefit be, and this was my personal opinion. I love seeing that building when I drive by. He goes, oh, it's because I sent him all the supporting. He goes, you can see it? I go, yeah, because he was looking at the ones from the side. So you could fund historic preservation, meeting the criteria of the CPA, which we'll go into a bit more. You could not do anything on the interior because, you know, there's no historic there. Would have to be done per the CPA rules. You could do interior, like shoring up to make the building not fall down. So if there's beams inside that needed to be restored. That said, not an easy project to fund, but it's a lot of money. It's privately owned, the anti-aid you'd have to come into. The other thing, so I said, well, what if we paid for a preservation restriction like we did for 84 Main? The 84 Main Street restriction came in, we had to set the value of it, we had an appraiser that specialized in historic preservation, because it's not the value of the project, it's the value of the restriction. And it's very different what goes into that. And that restriction came back at 650. which was not the amount that the property owner was willing to not tear it down and build multiple lots. So what happened is they added in, and I was totally unaware this was a possibility, of requirements of restoration work that would be done, even though the restoration work always had to be done under the Secretary of the Interior standards for the PR, spending CPA money on it, but they added in things that he was obligated to do for the restoration. Because you could put a preservation restriction on a building as is, you're restoring it as is, right? I mean, you're preserving it as is, and then not fix it, and then it kind of maybe falls apart more. Because you're not doing a restoration project, you're purchasing a preservation restriction on what's there. So using that logic, you could buy the preservation restriction, which value probably is not going to be enough to restore it. The restriction then would have extra funds added to do the restoration work. And then I asked, can you ensure that if they ever sell it, the town gets all their money back? And Stuart was well aware of that. He goes, a clawback provision. So you get every penny you put another legal document, but if you fund it, you own the preservation restriction or whatever value that is, and then any additional money, whatever you come up with to the property owner, they repay if they ever sell.
Do we have that in Main Street? I don't mean to get out.
No, because that was,
So Freddie, what's the benefit of doing it that way versus just funding the restoration and requiring a preservation restriction on their side? Is it really any different than what you're saying? I mean, you're talking about potentially doing a restriction and then giving them over and above for restoration.
It's the anti-AID amendment issue.
Is that
no,
why?
no,
No, okay.
the NTA would come in if there's no public benefit. And the public benefit is the
Okay,
from outside.
so
right?
I mean, is there a is that the preferred way to go versus just looking at the application and?
There's value to the town in owning something.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then I know there's a lot of people who think we shouldn't be funding private property, whether it's allowed.
Yeah.
It's an allowed use of CPA money. And here's the thing, most of the historic properties around, if you want to do historic preservation, are not owned by the town. We're lucky that, well, I don't know if it's lucky, but we happen to be fortunate in having a library, a townhouse, South Union School, that were all historic. If you cut out if you say only town-owned properties, what historic preservation are you? And when we passed the CPA, part of the reasoning was we don't want to live in any town USA.
Yeah.
You want to know you're in Southborough when you're in Southborough, and not,
That makes sense.
Indiana or Illinois or wherever. So, but that's something for the committee to decide, and it's just an option of a way to do it. But one of the things, again, Stuart said, is the NTA, there has to be a public benefit. You can't restore the interior and, the historic value of the building, which, and I said, I still love driving by it. I would hate to see it gone. But maybe the town people don't feel that way, and maybe the value's not there.
I think the clawback's a nice addition. I mean, I know tonight we're just talking about what's allowed, and I get that. It'll be an interesting discussion when we get to it about past decisions and.
Yeah. So now I'm gonna go to what, I think we have somebody in the room. Mr. Kendall. Are you Mr. Kendall?
I
Hi.
am.
So Mr. Kendall, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
This is Nate Kendall, not Jeff.
Oh, yeah, okay. So this here I asked Stuart about. And the answer is, like everything with CPA, it's complicated. So the first thing is the fire truck. The only thing he questioned was how old is it? And will that meet the requirements for historic restoration? It's a 1968.
Yes.
Which makes it 55 years or 67, 55 years old. So what Stuart recommended is anything historic. Well, there's a couple of things. Is the group that owns it a 501c3? So he asked that, I don't know how that comes into it, because privately owned is privately owned. There has to be a public benefit. So how will that be? That needs to be determined, like running the parade, is that enough of a public benefit? That's town council has to weigh in on the anti-aid because it's not a town-owned vehicle, correct? So the age and the public benefit. After that, he said, it's a vessel, it's an artifact, or is it a vessel? I'm not sure. It's one of the two.
Yeah.
He said, it was purchased in Southborough.
Yep.
Or South.
Yes.
And you'll see that in some of his comments later, because there needs to be a direct connection to the town.
Yep.
And if it went somewhere else and then it came back, it was originally here.
Yes.
So it can't be just a fire truck that's like a fire truck we would have had. It was this town's fire. So in that case, he said, depending on the historic, depending on the anti-aid amendment, public benefit, you can fund anything for the restoration of the vehicle or the mechanics of it. I'm not quite sure if any historic project has to be done to the Secretary of the Interior standards. And I sent you out a copy of that. I don't know how that works for vehicles, but you will want to look into that if the project moves forward. But the first place you have to go for this project, he suggested, is before you submit an application, because you have to have the historic commission take a vote. And they have to say it is significant for certain things, and without that vote, the CPC can't approve.
Gotcha.
And what, I'm sorry, not
Just to, so we haven't received an application, right?
no,
So maybe I'm just fuzzy on the details. So which nonprofit owns this?
So currently the Sulphur Firefighters Association is
Okay,
the owner. The intent was to move it back to the town, because it is the only anti-fire apparatus that still exists at the town, that was only used in Sulphur. And then it came out of service and it was privately owned for a bunch of times, and then it came up for sale and bought.
so it's owned by the nonprofit, it's on private land, but you would be, the goal of it is to be a gift to the town. It would be a publicly owned
Yeah,
resource.
so yeah, the goal was to pretty much save it from the scrapyard. It was destined to go to a scrapyard or use as a parts truck. Buy it, get it back here, figure out what it needs to either preserve it or restore it, whatever level we wanted to choose. And then donate it back to the town and use it for education, parades, Heritage Day, open houses, it's just selfish.
Donate.
Thank you.
Donate, yeah.
Oh,
Wouldn't it
okay,
be easier then
yeah.
if the town owned it, if the town did the application? But I'm saying, he just said they were gonna gift it to the town.
after they start.
After it's done.
Oh,
Yeah, that was the original,
Oh.
that was the original.
okay.
But I kind of get your point. Like,
Yeah, why not
does it
just
make, gift it back to the town?
give it to
and
gift it to the town now, and let the town fill out an application, and then you don't have to worry about the anti-aid. Any of that, because the town, again, I
Could we
don't,
be sure the town would actually, like, he's ready to do the application now. the
I
town
know,
can't
that's what I'm
right now.
saying.
Well, second of all, you don't know that the town wants
It's true.
it. They could think of it as a liability or
no, completely agree, Fred, I'm just trying to think outside the
insurance.
box to move
What
it.
are we gonna do? We're gonna put it. Do you have any idea of how much it would cost?
I have an idea. We've done some research into similar projects that have used CPC funds. And it's again, it all depends on what it really needs. At the end of the day, giving it to a shop that actually specializes in restoring it, figuring out exactly what it needs, and also, again, what the guys want to do, what the members of the department want to do. Do we want to restore it to showroom quality, or do we want to restore it to what the members remember it as? So we still are trying to figure that out. The highest bid we've got was $300,000, which is pretty close to another project in Medway. Medway does have a project, similar truck. It's a 1964 Maxim fire truck. Their budget is $295,000 to restore it. And then we The lowest one we got was $100,000, and that's to just to get it mechanically sound, safer to drive on the roads. But it's really just gonna kind of look ratty.
Used fire truck.
Yeah, like a fire truck.
So
So there's,
could we, instead of a clawback, put a condition that once it's restored, it'll be gifted back to the town?
Again,
I know
you
the
can't
town-
guarantee
I
the
know.
town's gonna
Yeah.
want it, so
Oh,
I'm not that-
because-
can I say, I don't think the issue is Nancy. If they're going to, they're the South Grove Fire what?
so Suffolk Firefighter Association.
You're the South Grove Fire Association. You know,
Yeah.
and the question is where it's gonna be displayed and how is it gonna be used? I think those are all questions that you can look into later. Also, the way you just said it, you could look at a, phase 1, phase 2.
Yep.
So like this year and the next year, when you start getting some, irrigation money back.
Oh, with
Just
this,
saying, right?
with this grant, are there historic grants out there that this might fall under as well?
I'm more familiar with historic grants for buildings, I'm not
Right,
sure about.
yeah, I don't either.
I mean, there could be, I'm not
Yeah,
familiar,
yeah.
so.
But I'm just saying, if it's
It's worth-
100,000 to just make it, and have you looked at any of the tech schools? Or are they?
So yeah, again, this is, we're still in like the very early stages. So we've looked at, one of the ideas was going to Assabet, there's some basic parts that maybe they could make, they can get involved in. Again, we're at the point now, I'm trying to figure out what it needs. But that was one avenue we wanted to try to take, is trying to include the community and include some of the kids that are in the district also, and say, hey, this is what we got. Do you want to make some panels for it? Maybe some body work. I don't know what their capabilities are at the school.
So how long would it take to actually go through and add on that process? To get in their queue and,
So to get it at the school?
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't talked to the principal Hollick, Mark Hollick yet. It doesn't seem like they have a lot going on. And it would only be a certain amount, it would only really be the metal shop.
okay,
So it does sound like it would be unlikely for you to submit an application this round for March town meeting. It sounds like there's a little bit before you could actually submit the application. Because one thing is, when we recommend funding, it has to be for, a very specific scope of work. It sounds like you're still feeling out where that's actually gonna fall.
Yeah.
So this may be something for next year.
Right.
Is that,
I mean, yeah. We could take some, we could take our time and get it right.
that being said, if you take this information back to the firefighter association and folks feel like, you get an application with it this year, then great. I'm just trying to get a feel for where you are in the process.
Yeah. I think we're at that point where it was more of a, try to get the feel for
Yeah.
here.
So it sounds like there's some details to work out, but it's absolutely fundable.
Well, wait,
Potentially fundable.
Well, yeah, the first step.
the big question is 1967. A historic.
is it
vehicle.
considered an antique vehicle for the registry?
I believe the
1967?
registry,
What is the cutoff
it's
for,
like 20, I believe it's
I think it's
25.
25.
It's
So-
pretty short.
if it could get an antique plate?
It's up to the historical
Yeah,
Because
commission.
historical has to determine
Okay, I
whether or
got it.
not it.
There's two parts of the historic commission vote. One is
Okay.
it has to have the local connection. And you do.
Yeah.
And the second part is it's a South Grove vehicle. The second part is does the commission believe it's historic, a historic vessel or artifact?
It's a great question, Freddie. I am not able to answer.
I'm not asking you because it's the commission, not Grant,
I mean,
but it's something for you guys to look into, and I don't think until that's determined. That's what Stuart recommended. Like a lot of times we have a gut feeling, yeah, it's a historic building, so we
I can
have
say
them come
for
back.
Historic buildings, the town zoning code is 75 years. The demolition delay bylaw, which we're trying to change, well, hopefully would like to change, is 1925.
Yeah.
Which we'd like to be more like 75 or something, so that it would change over time. But that gives a sense for what would be considered a historic building.
Buildings and vehicles are probably different, and
Yeah.
what
so
I
as said,
would
haven't done-
suggest is that you look into what other, you create your research, because there's another fire truck and the age. But again, what I said earlier, that the CPC has historically never said, oh, that town did it, so we're doing it. But you might want to find out if they have documentation on why it was considered historic. And then you might want your commission to start thinking.
I mean, would it be useful maybe for the association to just start a general conversation with historical? To go through hoops and ladders, if there's no interest on
Well, I mean,
starting or
it's-
doing it, then it just,
If you reach out to, well, you can reach out to me, but also Kevin Miller, Historical Commission Chair. I'm sure we'd be happy to have you at a future Historical Commission meeting. or
I think
just-
either way would be nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
informal
Yeah.
discussion or something. Yeah.
at least start the ball
Yeah.
rolling, to know if there is an interest.
Yeah.
That would be probably the thing to do.
I thought we were being supervised this whole time.
Making sure we don't have only number of people in the world.
Yeah.
Any photos of the truck?
I got a bunch of them on my phone. Yeah, I mean, if you want, trucks out in the, it's on the apparatus bay.
You store it here?
Yep.
That's what the My Southborough story, there wasn't a My Southborough story about, so.
So the chief is very on board with this idea, getting it back. Yes, and it was a big history buff. He was the first chief we had to jump through. He was like, before we even do this, what do you think? And he was like, absolutely. Store it here for now, figure out what's going on. And
So are there any, just because about the history of it, are there any firefighters in town, retired or whatnot, that actually served while that truck was in service? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Are there any that are?
but yeah,
So, I mean, how cool would that be for even town meeting to have firefighters that actually rode
It's the
in that
most-
truck?
it's the most talked about truck.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that would be cool.
And you have.
And you're
I assume there's
offering all this questions.
Oh, yeah, we got a bunch of,
You all
we're
get
still
a
trying
lot
to
of
sift through the photos because it served at we finally found one. It was an old mill down by the MBTA.
Yeah.
When that burned down, there's pictures of it over there, right in that fire. We're trying to find the document. It did serve at the Chelsea fire in the 70s. It was there.
Okay.
Yep. So
That's
It-
historic in itself.
it did its time, it did its service, and it only served in Southborough, it never served anywhere else, which is kind of surprising. Most of the trucks in Southborough Bob were either used back then, and then kind of like shoved off to somebody else. This one was bought brand new, only served here, was retired here, and then sat in private collections until today.
That's really cool. But yeah, I think, start the conversations and, it'll help us move forward.
Okay. Well, it's good to have a
Thank
conversation,
you
and
for coming.
absolutely helps get the ball rolling a little bit faster.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, so next up, the Southport Historical Society application review. Yeah, please. So,
Oh.
Just I'll throw the 10 minutes.
It'll be in the 60s.
Yeah, it's, you're definitely there.
Yeah.
Right.
I was dying. There's no.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah, we have a website.
I was gonna say those are questions.
I guess they made a mistake on this one. No plugins. Yeah, I know, I was actually just thinking the same thing. Like, oh, that's what first thing I look at when I'm walking around.
So on our next agenda item, it ties in with the previous two. Freddie's conversations with Stuart Sagamore also covered this, as she said, she forwarded in a copy of the application and got some guidance from him on what is fundable and what is not. So
Okay.
Freddie, if you'd like to
So
detail.
this here is the agenda item where with all the other applications, you went through the application to see if it was complete or full, but the first step in every application is it fundable? And this is not an opinion of the project value or not, it's just what is fundable under the legislation. And when you read through the full, that you, this document from the DOR, you have the full one. This here is just some pieces of it that are relevant to the projects tonight. I don't even think I'm going to go through them so much as the land for so let me start. The South Union School project is checked off as recreational and historical. So the first thing is for the recreation. And the application for me was a little hard to figure out exactly what was,
Bagel Hall.
what did I say?
Bagel.
South- South-
I don't recall saying that. That's scary. The application for Bayville Village Hall project, I found it a little bit hard to figure out exactly what was being asked for because the supporting documentation. Oh, Betsy had that, but you can send it to Grant. Can you send it to Grant and you can put it up?
Oh, screen,
Is that this,
Did you already send it?
is it the one with the map and the?
the floor plans and stuff like that.
Right. So by memory, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So the supporting documentation for the application. And you guys go through the application later, I'm just gonna talk about it. For me, that was a little bit confusing because it had the. And you can really love a project and like it, but that doesn't necessarily relate to. So. Scroll down. So this here is about the building, keep scrolling. The plan, because we're not being asked to fund any of that from what I could tell. I shouldn't say we, you. So keep scrolling. And that's how it's gonna be used, and that's what it looks like. And it talks about recreation and the caboose. And then you've all read this or had the opportunity, keep going down to. Here's the plan of what it looks like, and it talks about the recreation uses and some of the stuff, and then. So what I did is I looked at the budget. To determine what was actually being asked for. And that's what we kind of went over, with Stuart, some of the things here, right? Yeah. So the first thing came up when you read the whole application, it's for recreation use for the caboose.
I'm sorry, I'm shaking my head because right away I think if it's gonna be set for recreation use, we gotta get in front of recreation.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah.
First.
That's, no, because it's not a requirement. So let me explain that. The CPC always asks commissions that are relative to the topic for their feedback. Okay. So for a recreation project, they're gonna ask the rec. For an open space project, they're gonna ask open space. For housing, they would ask SHOPSI. That is the determination of the committee. It's not a requirement. The only thing that's required is the historical commission has to weigh in on the historical part of the project. However, the CPC can look at it and review it, and even if you say we don't like it, the CPC could vote to fund it. If the Open Space Commission says this is not a good, we don't support this open space project, the CPC could say, but we think it's a good project. But since day one, the CPC always wanted to get the input of the relevant town committees, because why wouldn't you, right? But I'm just gonna go over, because it's a recreation project, this is what Stuart. And if you read through this, there was also somewhere in there, case history of a lawsuit, and when I read that, it opened my eyes that there's a lot more to what you can and can't fund with CPA when it comes to recreation. And
Can I just ask, Freddie, there's a lot more in this budget than just recreation?
I'm gonna
Okay,
stick to one topic first.
got it, okay.
Because the thing is it allowed? So
Okay.
for recreation, right? I then had the conversation with Stuart, and then I asked him if he would put it in writing, and he's very busy, and I just got that today, right? So I'm gonna read this out loud. So. Do you mind if I read it out loud?
Oh, no, please do.
Because of people recording it, right? So, and Freddie, you would ask for an explanation of what type of land constitutes land for recreation use in the CPA legislation. That means anytime you have a recreation project, you have to comply with this, right? Here are the relevant definitions. Open space, which recreation falls under open space, shall include but not limited to land to protect existing and future well fields, aquifers, blah, 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 and land for recreation use. Okay, sorry, that got added there. I don't think you need to do all that. Recreational use, active or passive recreational use, including but not limited to the use of land for community gardens, trails, and non-commercial youth and adult sports, and the use of land as a park, playground, or athletic field. Recreational use shall not include horse or dog racing, or the use of land for a stadium, gymnasium, or similar structure. As you can see, all of the examples are of land that is permanently dedicated to conservation and recreational use. It is all open land with no buildings or structures or other uses on the land. In Massachusetts, dedicated recreation land is covered under Article 97 of our state constitution. So he goes on, he gives you a link to Article 97. You have this email. There are a few ways recreational land can be identified, such as being under the control of the Board of Park Commissioners or similar board, that would be our Recreation Department in Southfield. Protected as land for recreational use in the deed or town meeting acquisition vote. Article 97 protection, recorded restrictions, etc. There are clear legal protections under Article 97 of the state's constitution that apply to dedicated recreational lands. And those protections are not present on general municipal land. That is why a prerequisite for using CPA recreational funds is that the land must be permanently dedicated to recreation. It is very difficult to reach this level of protection on private land, which is why it is extremely rare to see CPA funds spent for recreation on private land. Using CPA funds on private land for recreational use would generally require the state to approve a recreational restriction on the private land to ensure that it's permanently protected, and most private organizations do not want to so waste their property. In addition, CPA recreational land does not have buildings on the property. Structures aren't allowed, and that is often where you can tell the difference between true recreational land and all other types of land. It sounds like the project you described was private unprotected land, which is primarily a building lot. So unfortunately, this isn't a CPA eligible expense. Stuart Saginaw, Executive Director of the Community Preservation Coalition. So that is just to the recreation component of the project. And you have further information in the Department of Revenue documents that say how recreation use is. This is important for you to understand, not just for this one project, because it goes back to South Union School. The playground, the CPC should have required that land be dedicated to recreation and put under Article 97 protection. And if it was a playground before, it already or was designated as a park for the school, the land in front and the land in the side, it could already have that Article 97.
The second to last paragraph resonated with me because we asked that question ourselves a few years ago when we had a possible opportunity to use CPC fundings to build turf on pay fields. And that exact same question came up. Of course, we were looking for gem turf, so we're going to keep it recreational, but it's obviously private. And we went through and found out, yes, we could, although it probably wouldn't be popular at town meeting. We did clarify, but again, it was very clearly because we were going to be using it for turf fields.
So there's other ways of recreational can be used on
Private, I was
Trail.
just saying that's an example.
Trail.
So I believe we have a license to use the land of the DCR. That land is permanently, well, I don't know if it's permanently protected, but it's protected watershed land. So this is something to be really well aware of because he puts it out in a way that is descriptive of all future recreation projects, the Recreation Commission and the committee should be considering. So there's that. The next issue is the was there another? There was another, yeah, email from Stuart on the historic definition of a artifact or vessel. And I looked up vessel, it's a boat. But I think it, so I'm not sure, he called the truck and the caboose an artifact. But, and this here is, again, the historic resource has to be voted by the commission. And this is not to tell a commission what to do, but they should be aware of the CPA requirements, which, I'll read this that he wrote. People, so part of this here is quoted from the act, right? And he says, people often overlook the part of the sentence that I highlight. And this is quotation. Historic resources, a building structure, vessel, real property, document, or artifact that is listed on the state register of historic places, or has been determined by the local, that was highlighted, the local Historic Preservation Commission to be significant in the history, archaeology, how do I say that? Archaeology. I don't want to stutter. Lisa said it, architecture or culture of a city or town. And he highlighted of a city or town. And he went on to say, it has to be something highlighted significant to your town. It can't just be some random artifact that has nothing to do with your town. That's why it's not Mass Historical Commission making the decision based purely on overall significance of a wider audience. It is the responsibility of the local historic commission to investigate and confirm a specific local connection to that artifact. For example, we've had examples of towns using CPA funds on historic fire trucks that were part of the town's fire department in the early 1900s, which is a fine use of CPA funds. But then another town acquired a fire truck that was from another state and wanted to rehabilitate it and repaint it with the town's seal and colors. That truck did not qualify as it had nothing to do with the town's history. We would recommend that, we would not recommend, we would remind you that the CPC has full power to decline to fund an application for any reason. The Historic Commission vote is a prerequisite, but is it up to the CPC to decide if they don't want to fund it? We've seen many examples where a historic commission has deemed something significant, but the CPC didn't agree and felt it wasn't a priority. So our historic commission has a lot of authority and expertise and respect their opinion, but this here, this is what somebody, as far as this caboose, which isn't from Southborough, but it is like something that would have come through Southborough and we had trains in Southborough. And someone else said, you couldn't restore, say you have an antique car. And it's like an antique car that might have driven through Southborough or been in Southborough, but it wasn't a Southborough antique car, so that would not be a Southborough part of that. So that's a consideration for the caboose for historic preservation. However, from what I read, there wasn't really historic preservation of the caboose being proposed. It was moving it here. In the application, it was moving it here and then doing the trench lines, you know, how to set it here.
What is all the renovations, HVAC, paint, welding?
So again, I don't see any mention of any historic preservation has to be done to the Secretary of the Interior standards. That is a requirement of every single CPA historic preservation project. So this is something for
Grant, is it fair to say if you guys haven't had that conversation in historical, we would on points raised, like what's the historical significance or tie back to Southborough, I should say.
I mean, so I think we would only do it if we thought that we were gonna move forward with this application or consider the application. So I think it would probably go through the similar process in which we hear a presentation from the applicant at CPC, right?
Well, I guess I'm misinterpreting the word prerequisite. Historical,
So like, we heard a presentation from James Falcone,
right.
just giving us more details. So I think I would probably want that on this, and then
So-
if we decide that it's something that we're considering, maybe I would bring, it would go for historical and we would discuss it.
And
But
can
if you
I
want-
state what
yeah.
this portion of the conversation is? Just, is it an allowed use? That the CPC has the first review of the application to see, come up with points that they then communicate back to the applicant. We sent everyone from the first round, the ones that were in, by August 28th. They got the CPC reviewed the application, made comments, and that was sent to the applicant to come back to address. So that's the stage you're at right now. So,
Like, yeah, we as
Maybe I
a CPC,
misunderstood the question.
we as the CPC could today say, we don't think this is a good idea at all, or we don't think it
Qualify.
qualifies. And we don't need to ask historical, or we could say, maybe it does qualify and we'd love to see what historical says.
Or so was the question, would you want it to come before historical to see if it has a Southborough connection?
Yeah, I'm just focusing
Okay.
on the one line in there. The historic commission vote is a prerequisite.
Right.
So why would we even entertain it?
For us to act, for us to
it's not a
actually,
prerequisite for you to review.
right,
Yeah, we can review it now.
I mean, I'm sure I'm fine saying that historical is happy to review anything you want us to review.
Nice.
But I guess we can
I
save
have
you
a
time.
ton of
if we
questions
decide.
on this too.
yeah,
So-
and
Or
we'll
if it
get
will
there.
help our decision
The
to
next step
go
is
forward,
for us
so
to do
we'll-
Freddie's given us sort of the background. The next step is for us to review the application and its merits with, especially with the, this primer on CPA requirements.
So can I ask a
Please.
question, Freddie? When you spoke to the coalition, I actually spoke to Chase from there. I had some questions and I couldn't reach you, so I just went online and tried to read what I could and find out information. And one of the things I didn't know is on the projected budget, the elevator for Fayetteville Hall is on here. So that is
Yeah.
like a separate, to me, it's a separate project. It's not a recreation project. And also there's the exterior ramp lift steel.
So
I mean,
can I go through those with you if you want? Go
Yeah.
down this list?
sure, I just,
Okay.
it stuck out to me like a sore thumb that had nothing to do with the caboose and then,
Well, it's a confusing project.
yeah,
And it's a big I shouldn't say it's confusing, it's a big project, but it wasn't really clear what the project was, recreation and historical. So part of the issue is
Yeah.
the building. So for the building to be, this is conversation, not my opinion, this is with Stuart, right?
Yeah.
And you will find all the DOR and the legislation information here kind of backing this up. The building, if it's a historic preservation project for the CPC to fund, you could fund some things as a component of that, but you're not being asked to fund the historic preservation because the building's kind of been gutted interior and the exterior has been done. And there's no evidence that any of it was done to the Secretary of the Interior standards. It may have been, but you're not being asked to fund it. So therefore, putting an elevator into the building is not an allowed CPA use. But secondly, there's a concerning thing here. There's the what's the word, supplement?
Then
Clause?
non-supplement, yeah.
So anywhere it says contracting.
Yeah.
What does that mean? It sounds like it's already been agreed to fund and that would be disallowed for the non-supplanting rule. You don't have a contract to do something if you haven't already committed the funding to typically. But you would want to know that.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, an elevator in a building is not a,
Well, it's not part of historic preservation.
right.
What
The,
if it's really fun as a recreation?
what?
Instead if it's a really fun elevator, it's recreation.
Buildings don't count.
Right.
So the other thing is, exterior ramp lift steel,
Yeah.
structural to building. Again, contracted and not a historic preservation project that Stuart could see.
Right.
The
Partially completed
HABAC
already.
paint, welding, Aztec deck. That's for the caboose. The caboose is not. The deck and all of that is not recreation. Buildings aren't, structures aren't. So even, and it would have to be on land. If it, like, if there's some portion of this that's recreation, the land would have to have like a restriction to
Right.
recreation. So anything for the recreational components is kind of out from what Stuart said. And the historical, the other thing, oh, because this was a, one of, in the DOR. And unfortunately, the ADA,
That was my other question.
not allowed, it's not an allowed use. If you had an ADA, if you did a historic preservation restoration and that was part of the project, the committee would have to look into if that could be included.
Yep.
Like at the townhouse, there were things that you chose not to fund because it wasn't an allowed use.
Yep.
And it didn't make some people happy, like it's a historic building, we should fund it all, but that's not how the CPA works. The other part of it is sidewalks are not allowed use, and there was a case law that's in the DOR, there's a link. I went to that, it's very interesting. Trails, yes. Sidewalks, no. ADA, I mean, there's things you think should be allowed, but aren't. So it's not a matter of not wanting to fund things, it's a matter of does the act allow? And some of it is based on future, after the language came out, there were lawsuits, so you have case law, and then DOR says allowed. And they don't write a lot of these,
IGRs.
yeah, what does that stand for? IGR.
I was very.
Informational something, something.
Yeah.
But it released. This one was 2019, so, you know, they're very careful when they put this out there, and it's very, you know, because it is tax money, so. The other things in here, paving, ADA spaces,
Drainage basins.
you know, chip seal paving. None of that is allowed under recreation, and it's not a historic preservation program for those components.
Is there anything on here that's eligible for CPA funding?
Not as written in this budget that Stuart and I discussed. That doesn't mean there's not something, I mean, that's for the committee to,
Yeah,
I'm not going to say, but as written on this budget, no. And if you also go up to the, can you go back up to the description of the project? That's up for the committee to decide from here. I'm just reporting. I was asked to run this by Stuart, and I did.
yeah, so it's not to say there's nothing fundable that is part of the project. I did forward a copy of the IGR to the applicant in this case. You know, we've now reviewed these responses from Community Preservation Coalition that go into some more detail. Those are now public records. We can, you know, forward those along too and say, you know, here's what we're dealing with here. Here's you know, the regulations that we have to follow. You know, if there's any work, you know, if you could amend your application in some way to include work that falls within these lines. You know, we'd like to continue working with you. For my part, and this will be a committee decision, I don't want to just say, you know, unfundable, no. I'd like to, you give the applicant the, give them an understanding of the regulations.
Yeah.
And there's still time, give them a chance to find work that is fundable within the project, if there is any, and get it into an amended application.
So I agree with that, Ben. I just have a couple comments, I guess,
Okay.
to go along with that. As one of my biggest concerns would be in going through the application. I had a ton of questions, but like one of the largest things that stuck out to me that as a planning board member sitting here on CPC, I saw a ton of red flags for me that would have to go back. And I mean, I like wrote them all out, and I have the decision that the planning board gave on Fayetteville Hall. I mean, the lighting has to be approved by planning board. It's got to go back as a modification, the landscaping, gate. I mean, there's just a ton of things that,
We've come across this before, like with Calander Field. It required permitting before Conservation Commission. I'm the conservation rep to CPC.
Yeah.
And we conditioned the article on recreation receiving
Yeah.
the required approvals from conservation before any disbursement of CPA funds. And, presumably if a fundable application came before us on this that had permitting requirements, we would similarly condition it.
but does it make sense to condition it and then bring it to town meeting? Or have the applicant go and do that prior to coming here? Because again, thinking ahead of the process. Instead of planning board or having a just disagreement or whatnot on town meeting floor.
Yeah.
It would behoove everybody to have these discussions in advance, so when we go to town meeting, if this makes it to town meeting, or any component of this makes it to
Right.
town meeting, that it is an approvable and fundable project.
Approvable, yes, there's an element of this, it's gonna have to come back before conservation to amend the notice of intent,
Yes.
the drainage.
Yeah.
There are some elements, it sounds like we'll have to go back to planning.
Yeah. there's a
And
list.
I don't know enough to say whether the snack bar idea with the boost is any kind of a change of use. That would-
Well,
That was one of the other questions I had, was exactly.
And I might just ask that, because I don't fully understand the implications when we designate something recreational area, but it sounds like recreation might have some responsibilities there.
Yeah.
So I'd like to bring the topic outside of CPC funding, like we
Yes.
should be talking to historical about what they're intending, because I have a feeling some of it, I don't want to speak for Sam, I don't want to speak for the commission, but you got pretty full plates.
Yeah.
So I just think that's a conversation that has to take place too, if that piece is going to carry forward.
Can I,
I've got just-
your opinion is rec is valuable, but it's not a recreation project.
No, I'm just saying, well,
It's coming across as.
Yeah.
But if it comes back.
Yeah.
That box can't be checked because,
Yeah.
right, so the point
They did
becomes.
say recreation.
what?
On the-
She's saying
on
that
the
we
board, it
already
says
deemed
rec-
it can't be.
Yeah, we can't.
Well, unless there's a
Parts-
substantial change to the
Yeah, the next version.
I see.
would be
Okay.
yeah,
recreational, but
the
this
deed, the
version-
property or some sort of agreement to preserve it in perpetuity as recreational.
And it needs to be all open.
Right.
land, Not a parking
Right.
lot with caboose and a building.
So, it sounds like it'd be something extremely difficult, but like I said, personally, I'd like to give the applicant a chance.
Yep.
Historical Society a chance to wade through, the various regulations and find elements that may be fundable. If that happens, I would anticipate receiving an amended application and at some point a presentation from historical. And, one of the things we do is after we go through this review here, we put together a list of questions that we send back to the applicant and they come in for the presentation. And I think among those questions would be questions about approvals from various boards, committees and commissions in town. Planning, conservation and potential zoning.
Do you want me to forward specifics of the questions that I had? Or, I guess, Ben, are you intending to go back and say, hey, look at this, we don't think this qualifies potentially as recreation? Or come back with something that may,
Yeah.
and these are our questions,
I guess Well, first, this is obviously a decision for the committee as a whole, for my part. What we're seeing here in the budget, I don't see anything here that's fundable under CPA. And I think, clearly that's the biggest comment. But with a welcome to, take a look at a deeper look at the IGR and the letters from the Community Preservation Coalition. If elements are found that they believe are fundable, we'd love to see an application with those, and as part of that application, we need to know the path forward through the permitting process. Something like that, with that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fine. I just know as I went through the application, it was very specific that, under the actual application itself, under additional information, it said after an extensive process, it has received site approval for the parking area from the planning board, which is the extent of planning board's jurisdiction, which I completely 1000% disagree with, and I'd be happy to go through each of the items on why I disagree with that, but
Right.
I guess it doesn't need to be done for this, but I would like to, depending on what the applicant comes back with, if anything, I would like to be able to specifically give
Oh,
them
yeah,
the places where I think it's a big issue as far as it's in violation of the site plan that was given to them.
Can I suggest something?
yeah, please.
I started out with, is it an allowed use?
Yep.
The purpose of this review is to go through the application. So I would suggest you may want to do that. If you're inviting the applicant to come back, are there parts of the application itself that aren't related to the use that you would want to see revised if you think it's worth your time, it is going to come back with something? Or otherwise, you're waiting till you get another application. Are there things in this that you think should be changed in any application? That was just
Yeah.
a suggestion,
Yeah.
because the point is, you're not saying you're not going to take an application, you're saying,
Here's what we see.
here's what you see for the use is not.
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, we really can't give too much feedback, so.
No,
Right, if
I
that's not,
agree.
it feels like it's far enough off. How much feedback we can provide until we see the next version.
Yeah.
That's true.
I just want to raise one point. I'm always that person, but I have to play chauffeur at 9:30, so I'm just
Okay.
putting it out there because I know I have to vote
Okay.
on minutes, because I don't think
Yeah.
Ellen can.
Oh, so, you know what, why don't we table this for a moment and get through the minutes?
We need to, I think, right?
Yeah, because, we've got 3 sets of minutes to get through here.
If we don't, it'll be a open meeting law violation. So-
Yeah, no, we've been getting gentle reminders from town clerk to, yeah, it's,
Got 3 meetings as well. 3 meetings.
if it comes to it in the future, we can always post draft minutes, pending approval. But we are not in that position here because Betsy has done a fantastic job of
Yeah.
getting
Yeah,
this
they were
together
great.
for us. So let's start in order here. First, August 22nd, 2023.
I got nothing.
Nothing? Anybody have any questions, comments, edits? No. Is there a motion to approve as written?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
What do I have? 14th, I think.
October.
Okay, so we had a motion by Brett. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And second by, okay, all those in favor? Okay, with one abstention. Okay, next up, Monday, September 11, 2023.
I had for 9/11, I had a couple minor.
Okay,
On page, of course, I didn't have it, on page 4, under page 3, it says from 2006 to 2011. Again, just a
Oh, yeah.
Scrivener, very, very quick. And the second one was on page 8, under Chairman's Report. It said Benjamin Smith receives an invoice from the South Grove Coalition. I think that's the coalition, what's it? The Boston.
Community
Yeah.
Preservation Coalition.
Yes, for their annual dues.
Good catch.
So that was the only two I had on that.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. That was a great job, Betsy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, anybody else with edits? Nope. Okay, that being the case, is there a motion to approve as edited? Okay, motion by Kristen, second?
Second.
Second by Lisa, all those in favor? And one abstention. Next up, October 12th, 2023.
I have a change in it. I made a mistake under the golf committee. I wrote in there somewhere that on page 3 near the top, that Tim Davis, Recreation Director, will attend the next CBC meeting. I think that was actually that he was going to attend the golf committee to talk about the consultant.
Oh,
That's,
That
I
rings a
think,
distinct-
it got a little garbled, so I can just take it out.
okay.
One item number,
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I went number 6, and I actually don't know what the way of handling it with this. At the time, we discussed quorum in hybrid meetings, and we said that in-person quorum is required for hybrid meetings. We obviously since clarified that. So do we amend the minutes or do we leave it in and add a correction? Because we didn't talk about it and we were mistaken.
I think we leave it and then it'll be referenced in these minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
And Grant, you had a,
Yeah, page 2, the underline, Southborough Golf Committee, it's the Southborough Golf Course. Committee. Thank you.
Okay.
So you just want to be sure that tonight's minutes reference that in the last minutes. The committee was mistaken.
yeah, the statement, yeah.
all
But you
right.
can't change history.
If there are no further edits, is there a motion to accept as amended?
Oh, sorry, actually, page 1, the same thing with Southborough Golf Committee, John Allen, Southborough Golf Course, and Tony Schoner, Southborough Golf,
Oh, non-committee attendance.
non-committee.
Oh.
attendant.
Oops.
I'm not
Okay,
sure
I'll
how many-
change those.
I think there's a few, yeah.
Worst. Got it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Another one. Dick Rusciani. He's an employee, not on the committee. It wouldn't let him be. He is the saving grace of that golf
Yes.
course.
Oh, yeah.
Unrecognized. We should get him that.
So does he have a title or is he just?
He's just a resident,
Okay,
not just, but
Yeah.
he's a resident.
okay, got it.
So with that, is there a motion to accept the minutes of October 12th, 2023 as amended?
So moved.
Motion, and is there a second? Thank you. All those in favor? One abstention. Okay. So back to the Historical Society application. I guess we're still talking about how we're gonna put together our review comments. I guess as with the other ones, we'll be going through the Betsy's minutes, you know, for our comments with the eligibility of various items or lack thereof. And you know, Lisa brings up a good point. We were asked to review the application, and there are some assertions in the application about permitting that it might not be a bad idea to address.
It's up to you, Ben. I mean, I can kind of go either way because if they come back with another application, it may be completely different. And my concerns that I have now may not be, but maybe we just add in the letter, you know, to come back with something, but to make sure that all permitting authorities, you know, however we want to word it, that, you know,
All permits required by the work be identified, be identified.
or something.
Yeah.
And just, again, I mean, I'd be happy to go through, like I said, I spent quite a bit of time going through it, pulling the decisions and looking at landscaping plans and. But again, I guess for the purpose of tonight, some of them may be obsolete when it comes to what, if anything, comes back to us. So I'll wait, I won't tie up anybody's time more tonight.
And then, again, my suggestion would be that we accompany the comments are with the correspondence from Community Preservation Coalition and perhaps another version of the IGR. The complete 53-page. Just to help them. I mean, it is a lot to wrap your mind around, and this will give them.
There's an additional page on the story.
Oh, that's right.
That I sent out.
The Secretary of State's standards for the treatment of historic properties.
And there was another one.
It's the grid.
Yeah, there is, and then this one here. APA requirements for his, that's off the website,
Yeah.
and it also has a link. For the Secretary of Interior's requirements.
Yeah.
I believe I sent out as a document to you, but
Yes. So if the committee's comfortable with that, and accompany us with those documents. Okay.
And if something
Christian
comes
had
back,
something about recreation, which even if it's not recreation use, if you wanted to state it, you could. Concerns?
Oh, well, on the application. Would just exactly that, like, you know, it abuts recreational property.
Yeah.
And so the idea of kids crossing the road, you know, again, it's just that the way it was framed for recreational use might actually be not the most recreationally safe alternatives, because it's already a tricky road.
Yeah.
With that narrow sidewalk, and kids are already like, you know, how many of you have watched your kid like dart up those stairs and you're like, because it's just a few more feet. So I think there's a lot of aspects there that's why I kind of want to, like, I know it's outside of, is it allowed or not, but that's why I think also this idea probably should be vetted outside of CPC funding, given its proximity to 9/11. That was my immediate reaction to that. Like, and that was kind of my point, that like, I do think recreation should weigh in here.
Yep.
You know,
and I think too, on the gated piece. So I'd like to know how the access is on any gated piece, because there are deeded spaces in there for recreation, so how.
which was an important part,
Right.
because I was on that committee, the 9/11 RFP committee.
Yeah.
And that was a really, like, there was things that were really important to everyone represented there, and that was obviously a very important one, because we just invested all this money into the playground, which is amazing, the usage, and those parking spots
And
are
it's
full.
deeded, it's
Yeah.
deeded.
Yeah.
So I know
So-
we mentioned conversations going on with the selectmen. I went back and looked at the agendas and I did not see anything regarding conversations that have taken place in an open session as well. So if we're gonna put something together, that's one of the things to tie on to Kristen, because I think it ties into the recreation piece as well, that
Yeah.
we'd like to know how the access to those spots.
Yeah.
Aside from planning, just. I think.
I mean, I might actually go back and for my own, because I spent the time on that committee, and find what our final recommendation was, because I think we probably vetted a lot of the considerations that we might even be forgetting. So I'll probably just, for my own due diligence, go back and find what our proposal is and all the things we considered.
All right, so it sounds like we have a good handle on the content of our comment letter. So if we're putting that together, is the committee comfortable with Betsy and Freddie capturing the content of our discussion and putting it into a comment letter and sending it to Suffolk Historical?
Yep.
Okay. Which is how we handled the other.
The process is the same for
Yeah,
every application.
And actually, I was trying to wrap that up so that we can, I just realized that Kristen's leaving. We have 6 minutes here to try to find a date for the December meeting.
First of all, are you thinking of the November 15th?
We have a November 15th meeting scheduled.
Just to know,
As
this room
needed.
is not available so that it can't be
We can't do the hybrid.
And it would be at the senior center, we still have a room there if you decide to meet, but the purpose was for
Presentation, right?
a presentation from Historical Society, and right now you don't quite have an application.
So
Are we expecting any, so I know that there had been previous talk about recreation putting in something for Rundblatt Field.
yeah,
Are we expecting any others soon or anything like that, or is that,
the,
I mean, that's obviously. an
I was trying to get
informal
him on the fire truck also. so
Okay, yeah.
We've seen that this
Yeah.
year too. Any progress on Lundblatt, the dog?
I will send it to you. Can I do that? Because
Okay.
we did get some updates. I just did not summarize them for this meeting.
Oh, okay. Is it something we're likely to see an application on for this funding round?
I believe we're still targeting, yeah, an application for this
Okay.
funding round. I'll
Okay.
clarify with Tim that nothing's changed because a lot happens day over day, but
If,
In the
if,
next
if
few
we
weeks.
got it in time to conduct a review on the 15th, I think we would still probably have that meeting if we're all available.
so I'll take that away and confirm by tomorrow.
Okay.
What the latest is and if he still feels we're in good shape.
Then I think we should try to pencil in a meeting in December. Perhaps in the first full week of December. Yes, that's the week of the 4th. I am unavailable on Thursday the 7th. I've got conservation that night, but I could do Tuesday or Wednesday.
Never a Tuesday.
Oh, never a Tuesday.
I'm flexible. And
I could do Monday, in fact, do Monday or Wednesday.
And do either.
That would be the fourth or
The
the
4th or
sixth.
the 6th. Does anyone have a strong preference or?
is there a planning board meeting?
Not to the 11th.
Either works for me.
Yeah. Six is good.
The 6th? The 6th.
Sixth.
All right, let's pencil in the 6th.
Why would you pencil?
Tentative.
Yes, yeah,
You've got the November one is penciled. You need the applicants, so. And Kristen has to leave, but you still have a quorum,
Yeah, sorry,
Yep.
guys.
So-
Duty calls.
you have your tentative next meeting, I think we would want to look at the agenda,
Yep.
this thing I sent out. First time somehow
Yeah.
didn't get it down. Because you still need the other applicants to come back.
Yep.
Answer questions, and
When picking dates, my only obligation right now scheduled is recreation meetings, so I will be getting a car look up those, but feel free and pencil in dates. I can only bring them around. It's because
We can savor being able to continue our meetings.
I know, really.
Without you here.
I'm always killing it.
You keep us efficient. I need that.
it looks like this, is that what you're looking for?
it is, I've got it.
Thank you, my daughter, thanks you.
So then on the 15th, just to go back to the
Yes.
November 15th, I'm probably gonna have limited time for that meeting. It's probably only gonna be able to participate maybe an hour. So if there's something on this application, if we could put it towards the top of the agenda,
Absolutely.
okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
The only thing for that agenda would be the Central Historical Society's application and if recreation has some.
Correct.
Oh, okay, then
There's nothing, that was the sole purpose of
Okay.
that.
Right.
okay,
and-
good. Then
and-
it shouldn't be an issue.
Potentially approving minutes from this week.
Fine,
That'll be
okay,
it.
perfect, thank you.
So let's see. Well, we skipped over chair report. The only thing I had to report was my communications with Brian Valentine and Mark Perkel that I talked about previously. We've got 2 meetings now set in the future. Freddie has given us the budget calendar here, the approach to annual town meeting. The warrant closes
The sixth.
on the 6th of February.
So we do not pay attention, may I say that?
Yeah.
We do not pay attention to the budgets and money warrant articles submitted November 22nd. Because you're not part of the typical town budgeting fund. And we don't even have our numbers yet. So what you do typically do is go through the warrant articles and send in placeholders.
Mhm.
Saying you're going to vote certain articles you believe, and if there's any uncertainty, you want to make sure they know that if they're coming, but say, for example, there was one and you weren't quite sure. You put the placeholder in and say, oh, we're not doing. But
Yeah.
you want to be more definite than that, but you want to give them a heads up ahead of time. You also need time for the town council to review them. And then advisory in the select board Saturday, January 24th. No, it's not. Some Saturday in January. Those are budgets. That's not.
Yeah.
A warrant article. So at some point in time, select board and advisory use PA.
That's after it closes, right? But before it's signed by select board?
No,
No?
it's before it closes in January.
Oh.
So they want to have you present, and when you do the presentation, this is something that is really important that committee understands, and I'm talking because you're all in. Yes, that these are CPC warrant articles. They're project proponents, but they're your warrant articles. So no project proponent goes and meets with the selectmen and the advisory committee on their own. It's your warrant article. You go and invite them to come with you, and then they present as you wish or not. But it's really a clear distinction because it's not their warrant article, it's yours. And that's really important. It can become important. And usually it's not a big deal, but sometimes it could. So you have to be there. And they need to come with you. That's a requirement of submitting an application. And we don't always have a lot of leeway of one schedule.
So, yeah, we're approaching the end of the process pretty quickly here. If we have to have them in by mid-January, given all the holidays coming up.
So the other thing to look at. Annual town meeting is March 30th. Lisa would know better than I, but yeah, don't some of these deadlines shift as
They do. And I'm just looking because.
you can't count on it.
Yeah.
There was a question on March 30th, and I don't know what or if how the select board are gonna deal with it. Easter is actually the 31st, and I know that there was some question going back to them to have town meeting the day before a holiday when a lot of people go out of town. So I don't know.
So it
where
could be
they're gonna
earlier.
fall. It could be earlier, maybe it could be later. I mean, I don't know, but I think that's probably something we should follow up with them on. I know that the question has been asked of them. That, you know, that's a tough weekend with a lot of things potentially on a town meeting to have people being out of town. So
Or baking,
that's you.
or family.
There you go. So again, I don't know. I don't know what, if anything, they're gonna do about it. They haven't, I don't believe they've discussed it. Maybe they have, but
So. Aside from the town reports submitted. You typically ask Betsy to write that up. You can make that. And the rest of it, you want to be aware of. You have a December meeting.
Yeah.
You want to wait to schedule the rest of Christians comes back with their rec.
Yeah, I think.
How about if everyone sends in their meeting dates to Betsy and me, and then we can see what's, like you have. Is historical scheduled out, or you just typically on Wednesdays?
We are. We're on the November.
Or you can, you don't, I don't need to
Right.
know it, send it out, right,
Okay.
you know them, right, you have Saul that you can't, I don't
Yeah,
need to know, just send it out, I'm
Said that.
not gonna
You can
remember.
send it to the whole Are we,
No,
just in a schedule or just to you or?
Just send it to me and Betsy, so that not, you're not all getting flooded, and we'll make a list and then see what dates are open.
Okay.
Concom, planning board.
Yeah.
Are you on any other boards or committees?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah. Always starts with one.
And Kristen's recreation and never on Tuesdays. I play bells, but, and you can meet without me also too, but, and then we can throw that back at you and then you'll see what looks good. Leading up to March.
So do you anticipate potentially February 2 meeting dates as you get closer to the end then? I mean, I don't know typically what you guys have done.
Hopefully it won't take 2 meetings
Okay.
in February. If things are going well, we'll have a meeting to finalize our warrant articles.
Okay.
Before they're submitted in whenever it is, somewhere between mid-January and early
Yeah.
February.
Okay.
Yeah, so your next December meeting.
Yeah.
You need to go through your applications and put together a budget based on what you think you're going to fund, and then I put together the whole thing and show where you can take the funding out. Like you should have an idea at December meeting, which projects you're gonna fund it, what, an
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
Like, is the Falcone at $800,000?
Glad you said that. I have been in touch with Jimmy Falcone to arrange a site visit.
Okay.
And he pointed out one good fact, no, we can't do it after the sun goes down because there's no power to the building. So, this coming Saturday is too quickly to post a public hearing. If a public meeting, if there's gonna be a quorum attending the sidewalk, and it sounds like a lot of folks are interested in doing that. And he said he is not available this coming Sunday. Next Saturday is Veterans Day.
Yep.
We talked about that, so that may be with the parade going on. We could potentially do it after that, maybe 2 o'clock on Saturday, or try to do sometime Sunday. Yes, Grant.
Just one quick note, for historical, I've done a good number of site visits and you don't actually need to post, even if there's a quorum present, if you're not deliberating, so you can be assembled there at the site and walk through and not speak to, and you can say hi and stuff like that, but you
You're not
can't,
gonna deliberate.
you can't deliberate about the matter.
It's tough that we wouldn't be able to really ask him
Yeah.
questions. Without, without crossing the line, or at least getting uncomfortably close to the line.
Okay.
Could we see
I just
if,
thought I'd point that out. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
if there's any way that we could have access potentially both Saturdays and kind of split it up?
Yeah, I mean, if we split it up into 2 groups. We could even, if he was amenable to it.
Yeah.
Like 1 at 10 o'clock, 1 at 11 o'clock,
Or something.
this Saturday,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, why don't I get in touch with them?
Okay.
Would an arrangement like that work for folks, like this Saturday, if Jimmy was available to? If we did. try to do-
Afternoon,
Yeah, but either the morning or the afternoon, maybe try to do 2 groups so that we can, speak openly and frankly
Yeah.
with Jimmy. He does like to talk about the building and stuff.
This Saturday is better for me than next Saturday.
Okay, why don't I try to do that?
If we go forward with that,
Oh, over there.
I did invite, as we talked about last meeting, historical to also attend. If
Absolutely.
you could let me know which dates and I'll.
You bet, you bet. I'll get in touch with him, tomorrow morning. And, I'll keep everybody, apprised of what's going on. By email.
I can't do this Saturday, but if others can.
Okay. All right, that's all we have on the agenda. There's one more motion. If someone wants to make a motion to adjourn,
So moved.
and is there a second? Second.
that
All
was
those in favor?
Lisa and Grant.
Unanimous? All right,
That was an awful lot.
that was a lot.
And actually, it